The NFL free agency negotiating window opens on Monday morning at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. We are going to preview the Titans free agency moves here, what the Titans should do, who they might target, who they should sign. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Broadway Sports Media in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. Joining me as always, Justin Melo, and today is our Titans free agency preview. I mentioned it there in the open. The free agency legal tampering window is what it's called. Woo. Opens on Monday morning, 11 a.m. Central, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. here in California. That is when the flurry of moves will be starting to be reported. It is an exciting time in the NFL. We're going to talk about who the Titans should sign, who's on the market after all the franchise tags and the cuts, and what positions are deepest. We're going to get into all that right now. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel. We appreciate everyone tuning in. This is our third episode of the week. That's a lot for us. We appreciate everyone who has watched all the episodes this week. And if you want to help us grow, if you like what we do, the best way you can do that is to leave a comment on the YouTube video below. And we're asking today, who do you want the Titans to sign? Let us know in the comments. It can be one player, it can be 10 players, anything in between. Who do you think the Titans should go after in free agency? Let us know in the comments. Justin, how is it going?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited. You said it. The legal tampering window opens this Monday, 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central. You said 9 a.m. Pacific. I'll have to take your word for it. I don't really understand West Coast. I thought it was like 3:35 a.m., but I guess it's 9 a.m. I'll take your word for it. I'm excited. Titans, according to Over the Cap, have $69 million roughly in effective cap space. What that means, Over the Cap, they take into account like the draft class that you're going to have to save money to sign, and top 51 effective cap space. So $69 million to work with, which is a lot of money, right? It's a lot of money. Just remember, you don't determine these things based on if they sign a guy to a 4-year, $100 million contract, average annual salary is $25 million. Well, the cap hit in 2024 is really the only thing that matters immediately, and you can lower that significantly with the way that you structure these contracts. So don't worry too much about total value. Don't worry too much about average annual salary. What the cap hit is in 2024 is what's going to help this team be aggressive in free agency and sign multiple players, because you'll be able to keep that number fairly low through multi-year deals, through void years, and all the BS that goes on with these, all the loopholes essentially that you find in these contracts. So it's going to be exciting. I think they're going to be aggressive. They should be aggressive. They got a bad team and a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. They need to fill a lot of holes, and they have a lot of money to do that with. And yeah, like you said, the cap hit is what matters. The guaranteed money is really what matters. Yep. And a lot of times, the moment the signing is reported, we get years and total value, and it takes 2 or 3 days most of the time before we get the guaranteed number and the first year cap hit. So stay on alert for those numbers when these signings are announced to have an idea of how much more cap space the Titans will have. But yes, again, it is not about average annual value at all when it comes to the cap hit. And as we're talking about how they should be aggressive in free agency, a reminder to everyone who maybe missed it when we talked about it a few weeks back on this podcast that the Bengals, when Brian Callahan was the offensive coordinator, 2022 offseason, huge need at offensive line. They aggressively attacked that huge need. They went and signed center Ted Karras to a 3-year, $18 million deal, guard Alex Kappa to a 4-year, $40 million deal, and tackle Lael Collins to a 3-year, $30 million deal. All three of those signings happened within around the first week of free agency opening, and those three guys at the time were perceived as the top 3 offensive line players on the open market, or arguably the top 3 on the market. Now, did it all work out for the Bengals? Did they really fix their offensive line heading into 2022? Maybe not. Lael Collins had some injury stuff, didn't really work out for them, but Kappa and Karras have been great on the interior for that line since they were signed. Bengals still kind of struggled to solve the tackle position, but that aggressiveness, I think we could see something very similar from the Titans with Brian Callahan here now. He saw it sort of work. I mean, 2 out of 3, I think, were win signings for them. Lael Collins cut not too long after he signed, and that didn't work out. But I think we could see the Titans do something extremely similar, and I think that is a great place to start here, as we're going to go through every position and players the Titans should target. But start with the offensive line here. Now, there are reports already out there of guys the Titans may be interested in, maybe linked to, so I want to get your thoughts on them. There are a bunch of names on the market. Not all of them are going to be high-quality players, but you could at least get replacement-level guys that can bridge you to a rookie who needs a little bit of time to develop before you feel comfortable throwing him in the starting lineup. Guys like Mekhi Becton. Tony Pauline has reported that the Titans are going to be in on Mekhi Becton. He was a former first-round pick of the New York Jets, has struggled a little bit with his weight, but reportedly showed up to camp last season in much better shape, has struggled with his health. He's dealt with a lot of injury issues. Is Mekhi Becton a target for the Titans, or should he be, Justin? What are your thoughts?
Don't love it. No, there's a lot of similarities to Andre Dillard,
there
right?
Are a
let's
lot.
Be honest, right? No one's the same, but former first-round pick, struggled to meet expectations. You were a little too kind there. Not only has he struggled with, health and injuries and playing late, but he hasn't been that good when he's played football, right? He's also struggled to play well.
I would
when
say
he's on the field,
he's been inconsistent. He's had stretches of good play and stretches of really bad play.
He's had more stretches of bad play than good play.
Probably
That's
true.
a fact.
Yeah.
So, Tony Pauline, by the way, doubled down on this. He reported it a couple days ago. Then he went on Blaine and Mickey a day or two ago and said the same thing about their interest in him. I'd have to see the full picture, but it's not one that I love. Did they go out and get another really good tackle? Did they sign Mekhi Becton and Mike Onwenu? Did they sign Mekhi Becton and then draft Joe Alt 7th overall or Olu Fashanu? Or did they sign Mekhi Becton and draft Patrick Paul, number 38? That's not a plan I can get behind, for example. Not when they've been as bad as they've been at the tackle position. It just feels like, what's the saying? The definition of insanity, right? You're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, like Mekhi Becton, Dennis Daly, Andre Dillard, right? And then failing to address the other spot too, right? Just wouldn't make a lot of sense to me. Not a guy I'm excited about. A lot of concerns with him the last couple years. A lot of injuries too. It's not like it was one or two. It was a lot of things, toe issue, I think, concussion. It's been a lot of things with him. So they still got Andre Dillard on the team. Maybe they want someone to keep him company. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. Again, I'd have to see the complete picture. I think if they're drafting a tackle at 7 and they take a flyer on Becton and he's in competition to start at right tackle with another guy that they sign, or with Radence, or resigning Chris Hubbard, whatever, that might be something I can get behind. But if it's Becton and that's the main part of your plan, then I hate it.
I fully agree with you. I think it totally depends on the role that you envision for Becton. If you're signing him to be your fix at left tackle, that is a disaster waiting to happen. We've seen that story.
Stupid. You're
we
an
know
idiot.
how it ends.
Stupid.
It is not. That is not going to work. If you're taking a flyer on him as a guy who still has some upside and potential that you want to try to tap into, but you're not relying on him, you're not finishing free agency with him as your top O-line signing, and you're not coming out of the draft with no one to compete with him, then yeah, you've done it wrong. And I will push back on something you said there. The definition of insanity is not trying something again and expecting a different result. That is an Albert Einstein quote about what he thought insanity was. And everyone takes this as the definition of insanity is. No. Albert Einstein said the definition of insanity is. Okay?
Well,
that'd be like if me
you don't
saying,
think Albert Einstein was right? Is that what
Albert
you're telling
Einstein
me?
is a really smart guy, and that's a great observation about what insanity can mean. But that is not the definition.
Smarter than you and I.
It's not the
Wasn't a Titans
definition. It's
fan.
not the
A lot
literal
smarter than you and
meaning.
I.
It's not the meaning of the word insanity. Is not.
It's not.
trying-
You're right. It's not the meaning of the word. But again, Albert Einstein wasn't a Titans fan. Smarter than you and I are. That's for sure.
Yeah, he didn't.
Probably was a Chiefs fan.
Yeah, he
Probably saw Patrick Mahomes coming a mile away.
Anyway, so yeah, we'll push back slightly on that. But I agree about Becton. There are guys on the market, though, that I think could move the needle for this team if you pair with Becton. So it depends on how much money Becton is worth on the open market as a guy who is sort of a reclamation project. I mean, I can't expect him to fetch a huge salary unless there's teams that are just absolutely desperate for guys with traits who haven't shown it really yet on the field. How do you feel about a guy like a veteran, Tyron Smith, who the Cowboys reportedly will not be re-signing? There was a whole thing about how they were going to meet with his agents and see about bringing him back during the Combine Week in Indianapolis. And then the day after that meeting, it was reported that the Cowboys will not be reuniting with Tyron Smith. So it was it's clearly that meeting didn't go well and they didn't like whatever pitch the Cowboys had for them, which tells me that Tyron Smith still expects to sign, a near top of the market deal, at least for this free agent class. He is a guy who has played at a very, very high level, probably a future Hall of Famer. Was still a second-team All-Pro recently, I think a year before last. He's been dealing with injuries too, but as a guy that can bridge you to a second-round rookie, a fourth-round rookie, a developmental player, I would be 100% on board with signing Tyron Smith to be the 2024 left tackle. He's obviously not a long-term solution, but if you can get Tyron Smith and Mekhi Becton and another guard or center or both, if you sign 3 or 4 guys and Tyron Smith is one of them, I'm all in on that plan. And that is the 2022 Bengals approach to fixing offensive line, is just sign as many top of the market guys as you can.
A couple thoughts. If you're signing Tyron Smith and Mekhi Becton, then you're drafting Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors at number 7 overall. And
100%.
maybe you're drafting that tackle at 38 because he's going to sit behind Tyron Smith for a year. He's going to work with Bill Callahan for a year. You can't get a better developmental plan, right, than I think those two, learning from one of the best of our generation and one of the greatest O-line coaches of all time. So that part of it I get, and I could get behind. I think I'm a little more hesitant on Tyron Smith than you because this is where my mind goes, right? All-time great Dallas Cowboy, okay? Why are they letting him go? Why are they willing to let him go? Look, maybe they think he's still great, and they got to sign, they haven't signed CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons, all do new contracts. So this could just be a result of can't afford him, is what it is. But on the flip side, I know, those guys are all under contract for 2024. So even if they sign him to extensions this year, it's not going to have a huge impact probably on the 2024 cap number, right? They're going to play under the current contract and then their extension kicks in 2025. So why not bring Tyron Smith back for at least one more year if you're Dallas, right? So that concerns me. Remember when the Titans brought in Steve Hutchinson, who was a super great guard for a long time and was very clearly past his prime by the time he got here, and it lasted a year, and I think he only played half the year when he was here. It's I would have questions about boys are letting him go now.
I mean, yeah, I totally get it. That's why I brought up
Julio
that
Jones,
meeting that they...
Right? Why the Falcons let Julio Jones go?
Yeah, well, that's why I brought up the meeting that was reported between the Cowboys and Tyron Smith and his agent, and then the next day it was reported they don't want to bring him back. It's clearly they wanted to make an offer to him, and Tyron Smith just didn't like whatever they had to say, or his agent said, we can get...
value still. And the tackle class is not very good.
Exactly.
He probably will get pretty good money.
And I wouldn't be upset if it was from the Titans, although I get your stance on it too. The other big guy here who could play tackle in the NFL that is on the market is Michael Onwenu from the Patriots. Patriots used a transition tag on safety Kyle Duggar, so no franchise tag for Onwenu. No deal has been reported yet as of Thursday. Of course, they still have until Monday if they want to re-sign him, but it does seem to, all signs indicate that he will hit the market. And if it wasn't for Tyron Smith hitting the market, he would probably be the most coveted tackle in the class. He can play, he's played guard and he's played tackle. If the Titans feel like they can patch up the right tackle position and Onwenu would fit better at right guard, and then you make Daniel Brunskill the interior swing O-lineman guy, that could be a path to success as well. But if you can get Tyron Smith to play left tackle, Onwenu to play right tackle, and then sign a center or a guard in free agency as well, again, this is the Bengals 2022 approach. I think that would be a huge win. I don't know how much money that would cost if you're willing to dole out, $70 million in total value to offensive line contracts, but the Bengals did that. They've doled out $88 million to 3 guys total value in 2022, so I could totally see the Titans do something similar.
The more I think about the Onwenu situation, I think he's going to get a huge contract. I think it's going to be more than what Tyron Smith gets annually, and of course it'll be longer. Total value will be bigger because he's a lot younger. I'm open to it. I want him. I'd pay Mike Onwenu top dollar to come here and play right tackle. I think that's where he offers the most value. I think that's his best position. I think the last couple of years have proven that when you look at the sample size at all the positions he's played. I'm just not convinced the Titans are going to do it. I don't think they're going to be willing to pay what he's going to command, because I think he can command a ton of money.
All right. If those are the top of the market guys, and then Mekhi Becton, we're still unsure really where his value is, I'm going to throw a whole bunch of names at you right now, Justin. Stop me when you want to talk about somebody that could be interesting for the Titans, because while we keep saying the tackle class is weak in free agency, there are a lot of names that are pretty recognizable, and it's obviously about, will they be above average, above replacement level, better than you could do with a rookie in the draft. So here's the names: Charles Leno Jr., Trent Brown, Cameron Fleming, Chukwuma Okorafor, David Quessenberry is on the market, Andres Pete, Donovan Smith, George Fant is back on the market this year. Jonah Williams has obviously been linked as a potential Titans option.
That's an easy one right there. That's where we should stop because none of those other names really inspire much. And is that like from PFF? That can't be in order because there's no way Jonah Williams should be ranked lower than like George Fant.
I don't know what the order. I have no idea what.
But anyway, maybe it's alphabetical. That's why Williams. But no, I mean that's an easy one, right? Like plug and play right tackle. I think the contract's probably. I don't think it's going to be crazy. Like maybe 3 years, $40 million, 3 years, 42. Like I think he gets somewhere between 12 to 15 million annually. You know, I think you know what you're getting. He's not an outstanding player, but you're at least going to get league average play at right tackle. And I think the Titans would sign up for that. I think every Titans fan would sign up for that based on what it's looked like. So Jonah Williams is one. If they're not willing to shell out whatever it takes for Mike Onwenu or whatever Tyron Smith, or they like the flyer on Mekhi Becton, I would rather have Jonah Williams at a higher price point, to be honest, than I would Mekhi Becton.
And you know,
at least I kind of feel like I know what I'm getting.
And if they sign him, you know that's a ringing endorsement because that means Brian Callahan has a lot of faith in him because nobody knows him better than Brian Callahan. At least
been his OC his entire career. I think they both arrived in Cincinnati the same year.
Right. So that would be probably the best backup option, I guess, depending on how you view Jonah Williams. I mean, there's other guys out there, Dwayne Brown, Chris Hubbard, obviously, of the Titans is on the market. There's other veterans, like maybe too old to keep playing veterans, like Jason Peters. And there's a bunch of guys out there, but I do think the Titans would be best served to really attack this position because if you're able to get 2 starting caliber tackles in free agency, that just opens up your options in the draft so much more. Maybe you can trade, you know, we're going to have another video coming out here talking about franchise tagged players the Titans could possibly trade for. If you do sign 2 tackles like this, maybe it does make sense to give up pick 38 for L'Jarius Sneed because you don't need to draft a tackle in the first 2 rounds at that point if you feel good about who you're able to sign in free agency. So it just opens up your options a lot. And maybe that means you could draft a corner with one of your first 2 picks if you like the way the board falls there. So I think that, you know, a general free agent strategy that smart teams do is they plug their holes in free agency so that they don't have to plug holes in the draft so that they can really follow their board and pick the best player available and try to get good value with all of their picks, as opposed to drafting a position that you weren't able to fill in free agency. And now you have this glaring hole on your roster that you can't go into week 1 with. So you have to overdraft a guy or reach for a certain position and possibly pass up other value. So that's one of the biggest reasons I think they need to be super aggressive on the offensive line because it is the biggest hole. You have a chance to bring in a bunch of fresh blood. And if you have to overpay them to do it, who cares? You got $67 million in cap space. Like overpay, not a ton. Don't mortgage your whole future. But if you have to overpay a little bit, just do it. That's how I feel about the offensive line.
Well, I can't wait to see what the strategy is because they have so many holes everywhere on the roster in truth. Do they attack a position like offensive line like the Bengals did and sign 2-3 guys? Or do they spread out their resources a bit more? You know, sign 1 or 2 linemen, 1 corner, 1 inside linebacker, 1 interior defender, 1 backup quarterback, 1 running back. Like, you could make justification for all those positions I just said. I didn't just throw them out there out of nowhere. So it'd be interesting to see if they focus on one area or spread the wealth a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And while we're talking offensive line, let's hit the interior too, because I think we're talking a lot about tackle, but the interior needs just as much help. You feel great about Peter Skoronski at left guard. Aaron Brewer is a free agent, so you either re-sign him or you need a new center. Daniel Brunskill is more of a backup interior swing guy, high-level backup than he is quality starter. There is a world where you sign a right guard and you move Daniel Brunskill to be your starting center and try to hide him a little bit more that way, the same way the Titans tried to hide Aaron Brewer last season. But I think in an ideal world, you upgrade one or both spots. I mean, are we talking about signing 4 or 5 starting caliber offensive linemen? That gets a little bit crazy to me, although it's not totally out of the question. That's a little bit extreme. But let's run through some of the center options because the center market is stacked this offseason, not just in free agency, but the draft has 3, 4, maybe 5 guys that are going to be starting level centers too. So that tells me that the center market is going to depress itself, supply, demand. If you have a ton of demand, then the cost goes down. Here are the guys hitting the market. Lloyd Cushenberry, previously with the Broncos. Andre James from the Raiders. Tyler Biadasz with the Cowboys. Connor Williams with the Dolphins, who suffered a late season injury, I believe, but
against
should
the
be
Titans,
ready.
Torn ACL in week 14.
So he may miss the first few weeks of the season. That might depress his market more or take the Titans out of the running for him, considering they probably need a week 1 starter. Connor McGovern, Mason Cole. The Bills just cut. Who did the Bills cut? The starting center. Who?
Mitch Morse?
Mitch Morse, exactly. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot. But anyway, the point is there are so many quality level centers. The Rams cut Brian Allen earlier this year. He's been dealing with injuries the past couple seasons. Is there any name? We did our ideal free agency, ideal offseason for the Titans a couple weeks ago, and we both said Andre James would be the perfect fit. He has experience with members of the new Titans staff. I still think Andre James would be a good fit, but if he signs elsewhere, there are multiple options that I feel comfortable with. Lloyd Cushenberry being one of them, Tyler Biadasz being one of them, Connor McGovern being one of them, Mitch Morse could be another. So, I mean, I just named 5 guys that I'd feel pretty good about. What a class of free agent centers we have on our hands.
Well, Andre James is the one I keep coming back to, right? The experience with the staff, experience in the system. The other one that we briefly brought up was Nick Harris, the Cleveland Browns. He would be like a Mekhi Becton-like flyer, in all honesty, right? Because he's no longer the starting center there in Cleveland. They thought he was going to be, and then he got replaced essentially. But a lot of experience with Bill Callahan. They drafted him fairly highly a couple years ago. So that's the plan B that keeps coming to mind, but I'd be all in on Andre James. He's the one that impresses me the most on the market.
He's my top option, and Lloyd Cushenberry is probably a close second for me. Either one of those guys would be a home run, and I don't know what the contract would look like, but you're probably talking with the market that's out there, something similar to what Ted Karras signed with the Bengals two off seasons ago. It was a 3-year, $18 million deal. You throw a little bit of extra money in there for inflation, for the cap that's risen quite a bit. 3-year, $23 million, $21 million, something in that range, I think could get it done, and I'd be all in on that. There are a bunch of guards on the market too, like a bunch of guards on the market. I don't know that the Titans need to sign 2 tackles, a center, and a guard. Maybe it's 1 tackle, a center, and a guard. Maybe Michael Onwenu slots in at right guard. Or maybe it's Kevin Zeitler, Kevin Dotson, Damian Lewis, Jonah Jackson, Dalton Risner, Mark Glowinski, Laken Tomlinson. I mean, there are so many guys on the market. Gabe Jackson, Cody Whitehair, Trey Turner.
If I had to make a prediction right now, I'm going to stop you there. If I had to make a prediction right, because we're 25 minutes in, we've only talked tackles and centers. If I had to make a prediction right now, Titans won't be signing a guard. Just a prediction. Not that I feel super strongly about it, but when I look at the realistic way to construct this O-line, you talked about signing 4 or 5 guys. Probably not realistic. Not all new starters. I think the most realistic way to construct this O-line probably it involves a new left tackle, it involves a new right tackle, and it involves a new center. That's 3 players. Very realistic, very attainable through the draft and free agency. And when I look at right guard, I think that's the one position you go into the season and say, Dylan Radins versus Daniel Brunskill. That's the competition I'm holding in training camp. I know I've got an ascending left guard. I know I'm going to have a new center, and I'm going to have a new right tackle. So now the guard's going to be playing next to better players than he played next to last year, right? Because the center, right tackle situation wasn't great. So I think you can get by with saying Dylan Radins versus Daniel Brunskill, right guard, winner starts, competition in training camp, the winner starts. So look, you could do something similar at center, but I ultimately think they're going to prioritize center, and I think they'll see what they have on the roster and say, we can probably find, league average right guard play with what we've got.
Yeah, I agree. And keeping in mind that you don't need to be elite at every position on the offensive line to have a good offensive line. And also keeping in mind that just going from the worst offensive line in the league to league average would be a huge improvement.
Would help this team a ton.
Exactly. So in one offseason, you don't have to fix every position. You don't have to fill every hole. You just have to upgrade the unit. And I think your plan would do that exactly. So I will agree with you there. Let's also talk here while we're on the offense about the wide receivers, because there are a few names that would get you excited in this class.
Are there?
That would get you excited.
Maybe get you excited.
None of these guys, with the exception of maybe Calvin Ridley, none of these guys are changing your offense. None of these guys are go-to wide receiver ones. None of these guys would impact your ability to draft a receiver at 7 overall.
Right.
However, there are
Agreed.
guys that can help you. There are guys that can make you a more explosive offense, more threatening offense, take pressure off DeAndre Hopkins, help your young quarterback in Will Levis, and help a rookie transition to the league if you do go that direction at 7 overall. Let's start with Calvin Ridley here because he's the hottest name. Played with Nick Holtz this past season, who was the passing game coordinator in Jacksonville. Had an up and down season. Overall numbers look pretty good, over 1,000 yards, plenty of touchdowns. But it was a very inconsistent year. And then after the season, there were some reports that Jacksonville wasn't happy with how Ridley, his attitude in practice and paying attention in meetings and his willingness to do whatever, be a team player and not just want targets. I don't know. There was some weird stuff that came out about his attitude behind the scenes. That leads me to believe that the Titans will not be interested because who was there behind the scenes with Calvin Ridley to potentially see all this go down? Obviously, Titans' new offensive coordinator, Nick Holtz. Now, if the Titans do go sign Calvin Ridley, that'll tell me that all those reports were bogus and that we shouldn't put any stock into them because why would Nick Holtz want a guy who supposedly was, a malcontent in the locker room and in meetings and stuff? I think Calvin Ridley is a potential game changer for the offense. I don't know that he's up there with the top wide receiver ones. I would say he's not a top 10, top 15 receiver in the league, but he's a guy that can take over a game, any given week. He could put up 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. If he's getting the coverages that are favorable to him, he's going to put up numbers. He was a lot better when Christian Kirk and Zay Jones played in Jacksonville last year. In those games, Calvin Ridley was more productive when those guys were on the field, which is interesting. And when those guys were out, Calvin Ridley got all the defensive attention and wasn't able to get open enough. So does Calvin Ridley change your offense? A little bit. Is he a go-to wide receiver 1? Probably not that level. He's a very high-end wide receiver 2, though. The question is, with him being the only real game changer on the market, what kind of contract is he going to get? Is he going to sign for $26, $27 million a year like some of the top guys?
In hell.
Is he going to sign for $20 million a year? Will he take something in the range of $15 million a year? Or is there going to be one team out there like the Chiefs or somebody that will overpay for him because they see him as the missing piece, or the Ravens as the missing piece that will take their offense to the next level, which he wouldn't be for the Titans, but he might be for some other team in the league.
I'm going to be quick here. So the surface numbers, I guess, look okay, and that's why I want to go beyond them. 76 catches for 1,016 yards. Doesn't take much to get to 1,000 yards nowadays in a 17-game season. Proof of that, he was held to 40 yards or less in 9 of his 17 games. He played in every game, and more than half of them, he had 40 or less receiving yards, and he still got to 1,000 on the year. You throw in 1 or 2 big games, you get 40 yards every week, you'll get there, essentially.
You get to play the Titans twice, you're going to get
Yeah,
there.
he tore him up at least once, I think, if I recall correctly. No, I'm not a fan. I bet Nick Holtz isn't a fan. I don't know if he is or isn't, but I can't imagine he is based on how things went there this past year. A lot of unhappiness, a lot of discontent in that locker room. I'm going to close out my thoughts on the receiver group like this. It's not a good group, in my opinion. A lot of the guys you hoped would hit the market, but you're smart enough to know they wouldn't, right? Michael Pittman, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, none of them are hitting the market. I think the Titans probably do sign one. The question is it someone they're familiar with, like Curtis Samuel, who's got some ties to the staff, Tyler Boyd, who's got obvious ties. The 4 that I keep looking at, and I'm not saying they'd get me excited, but I can understand the line of thinking. They all have the same thing in common. Vertical, explosive playmakers. This team wants to get faster on offense. They want a guy that can make catches down the field. The best one is probably Gabe Davis. I think he's the one that's a proven wide receiver too, albeit, in my opinion, he's been very inconsistent. Didn't fully run with the opportunity that was given to him in Buffalo. The reason I mentioned him first is because I do think he's a better player than the next 3 guys I'm going to mention.
You think he's
Darnell Mooney, who knows Tyke Tolbert, of course, DJ Chark, who's kind of still out there as a vertical guy, and then the last one, why is his name? Is Marquise Hollywood Brown. That's caught some attention. All 4 of them have something in common, right? They make plays down the field. When they make plays, they're 25, 30-yard plays typically. They're all inconsistent. None of them are like bona fide wide receiver 2s. Gabe Davis is the closest to that. The others you'd be taking. I think you know what you're getting in Gabe Davis at least. Like,
I want to disagree with you.
I don't know what I'm getting in DJ Chark or Marquise Hollywood. Brown just had 574 receiving yards. It's the lowest of his career.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on you though there, because I think I would rather have Hollywood Brown than Gabe Davis. I mean, you look at the offenses that the two guys played in. Gabe Davis,
be cheaper.
Gabe Davis played with a top 3 quarterback in the NFL.
I know where you're going already.
He was given the opportunity to be the wide receiver too. He was benched in the middle of the season for a rookie, Khalil Shakir. He never really stepped into that role fully, and I think that he was most of his big plays, like not all of them, I'm not trying to take away from what he did. Most of his big plays, I think, are more a product of playing with Josh Allen than they are a product of his talent. And would that translate to the Titans offense, regardless of whatever comparisons I may have made in the past to Josh Allen between him and Will Levis? But regardless of that, I think Hollywood Brown, look at the quarterbacks he's had to play with. Kyler Murray in and out of the lineup, and the rest of the guys have been absolute dog shit that he's played with in Arizona.
In Arizona, right? But he did play with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore.
Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, but those were some of his most productive seasons, and that was a Ravens team that ran the ball more than 50% of their plays, threw it occasionally, and he was the go-to guy along with Mark Andrews, and those were his most productive years.
I get taking a flyer on him, but he's still all that's true. You know what else is true? That he's still a slender-framed, injury-prone receiver that's not as productive as he once was. Like, if you're taking him and you're still drafting a high-end guy and you're hoping him and Treylon Burks, one of them just magically does something for you this year, I can get that logic, but he's certainly not preventing me from adding a receiver in the draft, that's for sure.
No one you potentially sign in free agency is preventing you from drafting a receiver at 7,
right.
But
it's a bad class.
I would say the guys I'm on board with are Marquise Brown and Darnell Mooney. Then maybe I'm okay with Gabe Davis. I'm okay with the Marquez Valdez-Scantling, too, if we're talking about guys that can stretch the field vertically, to come in and be your wide receiver 3 or 4, not to be a wide receiver 2.
If it didn't work in Kansas City, it's not going to work here.
He had a huge drop that everyone remembers from the regular season. He was not very productive in Kansas City overall in the 2 years he was there. Signed, overpaid massively by Kansas City coming out of his Green Bay tenure. But I think if you can get him for cheap, because I think he's going to be cheap now because of what he did in Kansas City, he can fill a role that no one else on the Titans currently can fill. And it's the same thing you're talking about, the deep speed field stretcher, the same thing that Gabe Davis, Hollywood Brown, Darnell Mooney would do, or DJ Chark would do. And I think that's how I would stack them up. I think if the Titans go after Calvin Ridley, that'll assuage some of my concerns with his, whatever off the field stuff was going on. But I think my preference list is number 1, Hollywood Brown, number 2, Darnell Mooney, 3, Gabe Davis, 4, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 5, DJ Chark. And then you're talking about Curtis Samuel level guys, Tyler Boyd, slot-only guys, KJ Osborne. These are all slot-only guys. Other names on the market, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Chase Claypool, Van Jefferson, Josh Reynolds is back on the market. Cedric Wilson is an underrated guy who can stretch the field as well. Paris Campbell, slot only. Sterling Shepard, slot only. Chris Moore and Nick Westbrook-Akina, you know who they are. Jamal Agnew, slot only. Quez Watkins, slot only. Like, a lot of these guys, as we go further and further down the list, Trent Sherfield, Ray McLeod, like, these are slot only type of guys, and I don't see the Titans signing a slot only guy. There's more. Jamison Crowder, Byron Pringle, like, that's most of the list is that kind of guy. So I think if you can pony up the money to get a Hollywood Brown, again, if you get a Hollywood Brown, a tackle, a center, and a tackle, your free agent class on offense is looking pretty damn good. And it paves the way to draft the best player available in the draft. It doesn't stop you from taking Joe Alt, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, but it definitely gives you more insurance if those guys can't step in and play right away at a high level.
Yeah, I'm ready to move on from wide receivers.
Yeah.
It's not a great class. It's I think they will sign a vertical field stretcher, and I agree it's someone that can fill a role for you. I think ultimately what they're really doing there is saying, okay, you versus Treylon Burks for wide receiver 3 this year, and let's see if one of you can run with that opportunity. Can we talk corners? Much more exciting conversation to me.
Well, hang on. Let's finish up the offense really quickly, like as quickly as we can here.
Okay.
With running back and backup quarterback, because both of those are positions that they sort of need. RB2. I mean, they're not going after the Barkleys, Jacobs, Ecklers, Pollards, DeAndre Swift, but the next tier of guys is definitely interesting. Devin Singletary, Antonio Gibson. I think Antonio Gibson is a little too similar to Tajay Spears in terms of what they can do in the passing game, so I don't know if you go that route. The two guys that keep sticking out to me that we've talked about on this show are Zach Moss and Gus Edwards. I think both of them would be a win. Another guy that fits well in the sort of bruiser role, Damian Harris, the between the tackles type of runner. I think Damian Harris can do that. Do you bring back Deontay Foreman? Do you look at someone like Cordero Patterson, who I think is probably beyond any sort of usefulness you could get from him? Devin Singletary. There's a ton of guys on the market. It's a loaded running back free agent class because of those top 5 guys I mentioned. Well, I mentioned top 4 and Derrick Henry being the 5th. And this all assumes you're not bringing back Derrick Henry. But there are also other big guys that would be probably really cheap, like a Ty Johnson, who can catch the ball a bit as well, who had some productive plays with Buffalo this past year, had some productive plays with the Jets before that. So if you can get one of those guys, a Zach Moss, a Gus Edwards, to sort of be your between the tackles runner and help Tajay Spears be a compliment to him, you should do it, as long as you're not overpaying, because you probably get a guy in the 7th round or undrafted free agent that could be just as productive, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the Antonio Gibson one only sticks out because of the relationship with running backs coach Randy Jordan, right? That's one, but I agree. I'm not a big fan of his game, and I don't think he should be what they're looking for. I've been team Gus Edwards for a long time. I think that's the one that would really excite me. I think the contract's going to be, fairly valuable. I think he's a perfect complement to Tajay Spears. Callahan will at least know him well from seeing him in Baltimore and preparing for those games against the Ravens. I know he prepares for the defense, but still familiar with them, certainly. Denard Wilson will know him well from being on that, from coaching on that team. Big fan of Gus Edwards and what he offers. I think Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, to me, are the lesser versions of that, but still intrigue me, and I'll turn it back to you.
There's 2 other names that could be interesting. There was a report on Thursday that the Bengals may cut Joe Mixon, who obviously, Brian Callahan, extremely close ties to Joe Mixon. And then Travion Williams is a guy who was like RB3 special teams level player in Cincinnati. Sort of lost a role to Chase Brown this past year, so I don't know if you feel good about him at all, but he's another Bengals connection, so I'm throwing him out there. Do you think Joe Mixon
guy too, though, if I remember?
Yeah, he is. Do you think Joe Mixon is in the conversation? Do you think when the Titans see this report or any indication that the Bengals are parting ways with Joe Mixon, does Brian Callahan run to Rand Carthon's office and say, "Bring me my guy"?
I mean, the familiarity, right, with the offense. He can catch passes. He's a veteran guy, but he's very different from Derrick Henry. So I could see the argument. Like, I agree with you, where if you're not bringing back Derrick Henry, you're not going to get Josh Jacobs or Saquon Barkley or Tony Pollard. Like, that's not what I expect them to do. But Mixon, I think the conversation would be a little different. It's obviously different because of the relationship and the fit in the offense. So I wouldn't totally rule it out. I think he'd be a decent pairing with Tajay Spears. So I think it's within the realm of possibility.
I definitely think it's within the realm of possibility. If you want like a veteran leader who can help everyone pick up the offense a little quicker with familiarity with Brian Callahan, I definitely think it's interesting. And if he shows he doesn't have the same juice, which there were games last year where it looked like he had that juice, and there were other games where it looked like Chase Brown was a better running back than him. If he looks like he's losing a step a little bit, Tajay Spears is your lead back, and Joe Mixon spells him, and he's a great pass protector. He's a great 3rd down back, and like you said, he can catch passes.
Short-term contract, it would be.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a world where the Titans look to bring in Joe Mixon. Okay, last position on offense. Well, we didn't talk about tight end at all. It's a pretty big tight end class, too, and the Titans don't have anyone at tight end aside from Chikakonkwo. Do you think
they got Josh Wiley?
Josh Wiley, sorry, I forgot. Rookie Josh Wiley was a rookie last year. Is there anyone that stands out on the tight end list? The guys that were cut this past week, the guys that are free agents: Hunter Henry, Noah Fant, Gerald Everett, Logan Thomas, Mike Gesicki, Will Dissly, Irv Smith, Austin Hooper, Jonnu Smith, Hayden Hurst, Harrison Bryant, Robert
Smith
Tonyan.
Just signed with the Dolphins while you're not paying attention to Twitter, because I am.
Okay, well, never mind that one. Tanner Hudson, Cincinnati guy. Irv Smith was in Cincinnati last year. So there are guys with Cincinnati connections.
Tanner Hudson, the Cincinnati guy, just because he can block. Yeah. Right? I think if they're going to sign a tight end, it's just going to be a Trayvon Wesco clone, right? Like a number 2 guy that can block. Tanner Hudson, I would just bring back Trayvon Wesco, I think I said a few weeks ago. But Tanner Hudson's one that I could see, Callie having an affinity for.
And there's another Cincinnati tight end on the market, Drew Sample. So I could see either one of those guys working out with Tennessee too. So that's definitely names to keep an eye on the tight end market. I don't think you're right. I don't think they're going after a pass catching guy, a Hunter Henry, Noah Fant, Gerald Everett, Mike Gesicki, Will Dissly.
Can't block. No.
Yeah, they're not going after one of those guys. Okay, backup quarterback quickly before we flip over to defense, because we're at 40 minutes on this episode. We talked about Jimmy Garoppolo a few weeks ago. You still in on Jimmy Garoppolo as a potential backup option?
I get it, but I don't think that's the route they're going to go. I think
agree.
The lowest level they can go, and we're going to fly through this one, is A.J. McCarron. He's got a lot of experience with Cali. They signed him this year in Cincinnati when Joe Burrow got hurt to be the new backup to Jake Browning. He's not a very good quarterback. He was with them, by the way, in Vegas 2018, too, when Cali was there, and I think Nick Holtz was on that Vegas team as well, so a lot of familiarity. If that's all they care about, that's the route they'll go. The option that I'm clamoring for, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Sam Darnold's the one that intrigues me the most. I really like that he knew that Shanahan offense this year. Titans are going to run an iteration of the West Coast offense. I think he's a high-end backup quarterback at this stage in his career. A lot of really bad backups out there. Keep that in mind when I say that about Sam Darnold. And there's something that intrigues me. I had it on pretty good account. Like, when San Fran signed him, they didn't know what was going to happen at quarterback. Like, Brock Purdy was still going through the rehab with his elbow. I'm intrigued that Shanahan was legitimately willing to start Sam Darnold in like weeks 1 through 3 if Purdy didn't rehabilitate as quickly as he did. So that's one that really intrigues me. And and in 2018, by the way, when the Jets drafted him, like, ton of guys from this Titans coaching staff, right? I think Bo Hardegree was there along the line there, who's now the quarterback's coach. Steve Jackson, Frank Bush, Denard Wilson, and maybe not Jackson, but Bush and Wilson, I think, cross paths there too. So some intrigue there for me with Sam Darnold.
I'll throw another name out there. I don't hate Sam Darnold. It'd be interesting. There's two guys that catch my eye on this list I'm looking at. Mason Rudolph, if he doesn't go back to Pittsburgh, kind of fits the bill for what Brian Callahan described in what he needs in a backup quarterback, a guy who can come in and, if you have to play him 4 games, he can win you 2 out of 4. Like, that's the level of player looking for in a backup quarterback. I think Mason Rudolph showed that that's sort of what he can be when he got his chances in Pittsburgh last year. He's not a high-level starter by any means. He's not going to be a guaranteed starter anywhere. So would he take a job to back up Will Levis? I think he'd be interesting. And the other guy is Carson Wentz, who is definitely not, nobody mistakes him for a starting level quarterback anymore, but he has a ton of experience. He's experienced in big games. I think he could be an interesting backup to come in and be sort of the same kind of gunslinger that Will Levis is if, you don't have to change the offense for him if Will Levis were to miss time and Wentz was your backup.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one that I guess could be an option, but I think they're going to opt for familiarity. Brian Hoyer's another guy they know really well. I'd be surprised if they go with someone they haven't coached.
Yeah, and a lot of people have been clamoring for Joe Flacco in our YouTube comments recently, and I don't know if I buy the Joe Flacco renaissance lasting longer than it has already been, and there's not really any ties to the Titans coaching staff except for Bill Callahan being the O-line coach in Cleveland last year, so I'm out on Joe Flacco, just too old for me. Let's get more of a long-term backup solution in here to grow and help Will Levis grow. Okay, finally, we flip over to the defensive side of the ball, the most intriguing area for the Titans, because philosophically speaking, what the Titans should attempt to do, is find a bunch of starters in free agency on defense and plug holes with above or about replacement level players on offense. So make sure you have no holes on offense from free agency, but you don't necessarily need stars or guys that are going to be high-level contributors. On defense, though, you kind of do. The draft is offense-heavy, and the Titans are probably going to be offensive-heavy in the draft, especially when you consider the offensive tackle and wide receiver needs. And B, the free agent class is defense-heavy, and you can go spend the safeties in this class are mind-blowing that are on the market in free agency this year, and the cornerbacks are pretty damn good too, even with L'Jarius Sneed and Jalen Johnson being franchise tagged and taken out of the mix. So let's start with cornerback. I think the Titans should sign 2 guys. One of those could be re-signing Sean Murphy-Bunting, although the closer we get to March 11th with no deal, the more I think that's not going to happen. So let's talk about some of these guys. You got Kendall Fuller, Kenny Moore, Steven Nelson, Stephon Gilmore, Darius Williams, Ahkello Witherspoon, Miles Bryant, Michael Davis, Desmond King, Isaac Yiadom, Ronald Darby, Shaq Griffin, Amik Robinson, Fabian Rose, Xavier Howard, Chidobe Awuzie. This list goes on and on and on.
I got thoughts I want to go on. They should sign 2 of them. If I was a betting man, predicting man, the 2 will be Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby. And we're talking about a lot of familiarity here. Ronald Darby spent the 2020 season in Washington with cornerbacks coach and defensive passing game coordinator Chris Harris once upon a time. Now, they cut him recently. He takes like a 1-year prove-it deal in Baltimore to play for who? Denard Wilson there in Baltimore, and rehabilitated his career. this past year, okay? He was good. He played 442 snaps at corner this past year. That accounted for 39% of all Ravens plays. This might shock you in case the positions were designated incorrectly. That was the second most snaps of any corner played in Baltimore this year, 442. PFF had a coverage grade of 71.7 for him. He allowed only 25 catches on 51 targets. That's less than 50% of the targets that were thrown his way, and QBs only saw a passer rating of 72.2. This guy signed a one-year prove-it deal, like $1.7 million with Baltimore. He's earned more money, not a ton. He's still going to be good value, I think, on the market. But the familiarity with Chris Harris and Denard Wilson, I think, makes him a really easy target, right? And the other one for me is Kendall Fuller, also played under Chris Harris once upon a time in Washington. He's so versatile. I think they'd bring him here to play boundary corner. I don't expect either of them to be very expensive, and I do think both of them, I could totally see both of them ending up in Tennessee because they're not going to be overly expensive. I don't think it's a great corner market. I slightly disagree with you there. I think losing Jalen Johnson and L'Jarius Sneed hurt. There are a couple of those flyers that got cut. Tre'Davious White, Darius Williams. There's one more, I think.
Xavier Howard.
Xavier Howard was the other one I'm thinking of. Like, buyer beware label with age and injury, I think, for all three of them. They're all like 30, 31, I think. Fuller's a guy that's around that age, but has kind of maintained his level of play as he's gotten older. Those others haven't as much. So for me, Ronald Darby, Kendall Fuller, no. I'm a big fan. I'm going to say this real quick. Chidobe Awuzie is one. Callahan will know from his time in Cincinnati. I don't know what it is with me. The last 5 years, I've been really good. I wish I had documented history of being going into free agency, I really want the Titans to sign this corner. They don't. They end up signing for a low contract, and then they play really well. Remember that guy from Vanderbilt signed with the Chargers, 3 years, $15 million? That's one I always get hung up on because I want the Titans to sign him so bad. Chargers got great value on that deal. He was playing well in Atlanta still a couple years ago. He's old and finished now, but Awuzie strikes me as that kind of guy. I really wanted them to add him before he ended up in Cincinnati, and I thought Cincinnati got great value out of that deal. That's a good football player. If they're not signing both Darby and Fuller, I can see Awuzie taking one of those spots.
I agree. I like Chidobe Awuzie. Another guy I like is Jordan Lewis, although I like him more as a college prospect coming out of Michigan than I do as an NFL player who played for the Cowboys the last 4 years. But I always liked Jordan Lewis. I'll throw another name at you, and this is one that follows a Rand Carthon pattern we saw last summer. Last offseason, I should say. Titans signed Azeez Al-Shire, Daniel Brunskill, and Arden Key, three guys that Rand Carthon had familiarity with from his time in San Francisco. Rand Carthon was the director of player personnel in San Francisco in 2017 through 2020 when the Niners drafted Ahkello Witherspoon, who is now a free agent on the market. No, you don't see any hope for Ahkello Witherspoon? I thought he had a pretty good year.
Was he in Pittsburgh this past year? Where was he?
He was with the Rams this past year and had a pretty good season. Yeah,
I confused him with Levi Wallace. Levi Wallace was the guy that was burnt toast this year in Pittsburgh really badly.
No,
I liked Ahkello coming out. I remember
that. He's a guy that helped the Rams who had, were supposed to be bad this year. Remember, everyone going into the season thought the Rams would be bad. He was one of the best players on their defense and helped them become a team that was not terrible.
That turnover was crazy. I'm sorry. Him, Kobe Turner, Byron Young. I think Darion Kendrick has played some good snaps for them. Kobe Durant. Just crazy how much talent they have found that no one knew about.
Yeah. So I could see a scenario where, he's played for a couple teams since he was with the Niners. He signed a 1-year deal with the Seahawks, and then there was that weird trade. He was quickly traded to Pittsburgh, played 2 years in Pittsburgh, and then, he signed a 2-year deal with the Seahawks. But then was quickly traded to Pittsburgh, and then the Rams picked him up this past season on a 1-year prove-it deal, and he proved it, and now he's hitting the market again. I just think with that San Francisco connection, the fact that he had a great season this past year, could totally see Rand Carthon targeting him if they miss out on your top guys like Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby. All right, does that cover your cornerback class? Any other names we want to mention here? Again, it's a very deep class. Like you said, it's not necessarily that top heavy with Jalen Johnson and L'Jarius Sneed out of the mix, but there's guys that could be starting level corners like Shaq Griffin, Desmond King. Desmond King might be cooked by now. Trey Herndon, Bryce Hall, Isaiah Oliver, Jeff Okuda, some reclamation project level guys, some cornerback 3 or veteran savvy guys that could rotate in if you need a guy. Anyone else worth mentioning on the list?
No, I think the 3 targets for me should be Ronald Darby, Kendall Fuller, and
Chidobe.
And Chidobe Awuzie. And then again, kick the tires on Trey White, Darius Williams, Xavier Howard, maybe, but we'll see. Let's talk interior D lineman real quick because I think that's an underrated need. They got no one to play next to Jeffrey Simmons right now. No one's talking about it because all the other holes, they got so many and they're probably more fun to talk about. But they need a Tier Tart replacement. I get it. Tier Tart, well, no one likes him, but they need a run stopper. There are some good ones. Okay, there's some guys that can play. Shelby Harris is a veteran guy that's still stopping the run. Grover Stewart is a guy in Indianapolis I've loved for such a long time. Remember when they stole Dinoco Autry from the Colts? I'd love to take Grover Stewart with me now. And there are a couple others. Sheldon Rankins. Like, I wouldn't spend a ton of money at this position, but I would add a high-level run stopper that can play next to Jeffrey Simmons.
I can hear the YouTube commenters now. What about Christian Wilkins? Come on, what about Christian Wilkins?
Too much money. Same position as Simmons. 3-tech, right? Like, doesn't make a lot of sense. No. By the way, you want to talk about Rand Carthon, the connection to San Fran? I don't love the fit, but maybe as a rotational guy, but not as a guy to play next to Simmons because he gets blown up in the run game too much. But Javon Kinlaw, who's been there in San Francisco, hasn't lived up to expectations as a former first-rounder. He's a guy that's free. I think Kevin Givens is free too. Remember, Rand Carthon did a lot of the 6th round UDFA work in San Fran. Kevin Givens was a success story as a UDFA for them. That was years ago, and he's still on the team, and he's played snaps for them. So I wonder if they look at a guy like Kevin Givens or Javon Kinlaw coming from San Fran. But I think none of those guys are great run stoppers. That's my one hang-up there. I think they need a great run stopper to pair next to Simmons.
How about a great run stopper who played for the Bengals last year in DJ Reader?
It's going to be expensive. That's the one thing I didn't mention. It's going to be expensive. I mean, I think PFF's got the projected contract at like $10, $11 million a year. I mean, hey, you said it in the beginning, or I said it. Like, that cap hit's probably only $5-6 million next year, so it's manageable. But I think I'd be surprised if they made that big of a splash at D tackle. I think they're going to look for good value through a run stopper.
I'm going to throw this name out because how can we at least not mention why we didn't talk about him? But Chris Jones on the market still.
Yeah, I mean, he won't be. By the time this episode releases, he might not be on the market still.
Agreed.
Right? Like, the Chiefs are going to bring him back.
Yeah.
Again, you're not paying him $27 million a year after paying Jeffrey Simmons $27 million a year. Right?
The other high-end guy on this list is Leonard Williams, who, I mean, Simmons and Leonard Williams together may be the most expensive defensive tackle duo in the NFL when it's all said and done, but they also could be one of the best. I mean, that would be a beefy interior.
Again, I'd be surprised if they spent that kind of money.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's talk about the safety class because, like I mentioned at the top, there are so many guys who are available at the safety position, and there's been some cuts around the league. So let's start with a guy who probably the best free agent safety on the market, although I don't know at this point in his career what he looks like, but Justin Simmons waived by the Broncos on Thursday, or released by the Broncos on Thursday. Justin Simmons to Tennessee?
I don't know about Justin Simmons specifically, but I will say it's a good thing for the Titans that there are so many safeties on this market because that's going to drive the price way down. The NFL just told you we're not paying safeties anymore. We're not paying veteran safeties. Like, who just got cut? Quandre Diggs, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde was in Buffalo too, Justin Simmons, Kevin Byard got cut. I'm probably missing like 5 guys. That's how many safeties have been cut over the last few days. And
Eddie
the market
Jackson
already had a couple.
I got more for you. Eddie Jackson, Xavier McKinney, both also released. Yep.
Did McKinney get? I thought he was just free.
Oh,
Eddie
he might
Jackson
just be a
got
free
released.
agent.
I think McKinney's just a free agent. But guys who are on the market, we've talked about a couple weeks ago that have ties to this staff: C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Geno Stone. This is a loaded safety class. It's great news for the Titans because I think what that means is they should get a pretty good one for pretty cheap to play next to Amani Hooker.
Oh, Rayshon Jenkins was released by Jacksonville as well.
That's right.
Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is at the top of the list for me. I mean, when he played with Denard Wilson in Philly, led the league in interceptions with Denard Wilson as his secondary coach. I think he's a very high-level player. He brings a nastiness, and sometimes that nastiness can be a 15-yard penalty, but a lot of times that nastiness is sort of a tone-setting player on the defensive side of the ball. He's one of my, he fits so well with what the Titans need. I think he might be at the very, very top of my free agent priority list, even above some of the tackles we talked about and the centers we talked about. I just think he would be such a good addition to this group. Eddie Jackson is a guy who stormed onto the scene as a rookie, was a turnover machine for the Bears, slowed down by injury the last couple of years, but he intrigues me a little bit as a lower cost signing. There's also Marcus May, who has some crossover with members of the Titans coaching staff.
Yeah.
now on the defensive side of the ball.
Denard Wilson, I think, with the Jets.
Yeah, I think that's right. Quandre, you want to know how many Texas players are on this list? Quandre Diggs, Deshaun Elliott, PJ Locke. That's at least 3
A lot
free
of bad
agent
Texas
safeties.
players. Makes sense.
Free agent safeties that played football at the University of Texas. I'm in on any of them just because of my bias. But also the guy that we've mentioned on previous pods that we didn't mention yet today, Geno Stone, stepped in for an injured Marcus Williams in Baltimore last year, had a phenomenal season.
Under Denard Wilson.
Proved himself to be a starting caliber safety, even though he did not go into the season as a starter. So I think he'd be a great signing as well. Sort of the type of guys that Rand Carthon signed last year who were like, had to step in and be spot starters and now give them a chance to actually be a full-time starter with a lower cost contract because they haven't been that yet. I could totally see Geno Stone making a ton of sense for the Titans.
Yeah, I think I would take, you said CJ topped your list. I would take Geno Stone ahead of CJ just because he's not coming, CJ's coming off the injury and really inconsistent year. I think you might feel a bit better about what you're getting with Geno, but I will say the ceiling, I think, much higher on CJ Gardner-Johnson. This guy led the league in interceptions under Denard Wilson, by the way.
Exactly.
2022, right,
yeah.
when Wilson was with the Eagles. So a lot of safeties on the market. I'd still be surprised if it wasn't Stone or CJ. I think they're going to bring in someone that's familiar with Coach Wilson.
Yeah, I think they bring in one of those two guys as a starter and then another player on this list that could be like a third safety, depending on how they view Elijah Molden, or even just like a special teams level player like a Kayvon Wallace return or something like that. So I think they signed multiple safeties, one of them to a big deal and one of them to something a lot smaller. Two more positions to talk about here. Linebacker and edge rusher. Let's start with linebacker, where the Titans have like nobody under contract, at least nobody that you
Otis Reese played really well down the stretch there. I think they could see him maybe growing into a starting role this season. They're going to bring back Jack Gibbons, who's an ERFA.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the clock keeps ticking here. No deal with Zecel Shire as of now. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this position, but they're going to have to bring a guy in. We talked about Patrick Queen a couple years ago. That would be quite the foresight. We talked about Patrick Queen a couple weeks ago because of the connections with Denard Wilson. Great year in Baltimore under coach, or partially under Coach Wilson. We know he's going to be expensive. Are they willing to spend that kind of money at inside backer? I've made my point clear. I'd rather spend that on other positions like corner and receiver and tackle, and not so much receiver because I hate the class, but offensive line and corner especially. Are they going to spend that kind of money? I don't know, but he is someone that's got obvious ties to the new staff.
Yeah, there's a bunch of names on this list that I'd feel comfortable with being a starting linebacker for the Titans. Jerome Baker, released by the Dolphins recently, is one. Kenneth Murray, coming out of the Chargers, never really lived up to the hype. I think I'm out on him, but he's a name that people might recognize on the list. Shaquille Leonard, another name people might recognize. He's over the hill. I would say he's done. The Bucs have two guys hitting the market in Levante David and Devin White. Either of them intrigue you?
I wouldn't pay the money. No,
I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't. No.
A guy I do like on the market is Anthony Walker out of Cleveland, and another name, Josie Jewell, former Bronco. Both of those guys could be, leading tackler level players for your defense. I would be interested in both of them at lower cost deals.
Anthony Walker, I think, could play in coverage some, so he's one that intrigues me a little. I think they need a guy that can play in coverage. They don't really have one right now on the roster, like you said, so I think that would be a shrewd signing.
Another guy I'll throw out there, Willie Gay, played with the Chiefs last year, obviously a Super Bowl winning linebacker. I don't know if he was like a starter or more of a package guy, but I think he's another guy that could be due for like a role increase if the Titans saw it that way.
Yeah, Willie Gay's a guy that I've liked since he came out of college, so that's one I'd be willing to take a flyer on.
And then there's a bunch of other names on this list. I think the Titans are going to have to add one or two if they don't bring back Azeez Al-Shire, and whether that's top of the market like a Patrick Queen. We didn't mention Frankie Louvu, who's another guy near the top of the market, or if that's somebody lower level like a Drew Tranquil, Denzel Perryman, Mac Wilson signing. I think they have to add multiple guys here because a lot of times your backup linebackers are also key special teams players, and I think the Titans could use some of those too. Okay, let's close this out with edge rusher. I'm just going to say right off the bat, I don't expect the Titans to sign a big name edge rusher at all, but I do think they might surprise us and take a chance on somebody. And the guy that has my eye, and maybe I'm crazy, tell me if I'm crazy, is Chase Young.
I mean, Carthon wasn't there in San Fran.
No,
when
he
they
wasn't.
brought
There's
him
no,
in, right?
yeah,
So
there's no Niners connection there. But former first round pick, started his career really strong, has dealt with injuries a lot. But he was, I mean, when he was at his best, he was dominant.
He was. I mean, that rookie year, I remember him starting with a bang, and it's a shame that injuries and whatever else has sort of derailed a little bit. I thought he was just like the perfect prospect coming out of Ohio State.
I bet money on him to win defensive rookie of the year that year at 2-1 odds. It was the easiest money I ever made in my life.
And then the ACL, I think, happened the following year and just hasn't been able to get back. I agree with you. I think if anything, they're going to take a chance on like a rotational guy, like even a lower level guy than Arden Key, right? I think that, they've got Landry and Key. Still think they should focus on re-signing Dinoco Autry, but we'll see what happens there. Ultimately, I think they'll bring in someone. It'll be a flyer though, right? Like low cost. But I think all attention should still be on trying to get Dinoco Autry back under contract.
I would say time is a flat circle here because there are two guys on the market now that we talked about 4 years ago, whenever they signed originally, that would be interesting for the Titans, and those are Romeo Okwara and Carl Lawson. Are those guys still interesting to the Titans? Because
Carl Lawson was in Cincinnati, right? So it's easy to draw that connection. I liked him a lot. It's he had the injury, I think, right after he signed there, so that sort of derailed. He signed in the Jets and had the injury. That sort of derailed his projection there, and they've done so much to replace him since. But I liked him in Cincinnati once upon a time. I don't know how much he's got left. But again, I think anyone you're signing is going to be your third or fourth rusher at most. So perhaps you'd be more willing to take a chance on a guy like that.
I would be very down for the Titans to sign Jonathan Grenard, if for no other reason than to snatch him away from the Houston Texans. He was really productive this last year.
Great
former
player.
mid-round pick. I think he's a great player too. Bryce Huff is a guy we've talked about on this podcast from the Jets. Derek Barnett is a local guy, went to Tennessee, has, been productive at points in his career playing in a loaded Eagles defense, was with Houston this past season. Shaq Barrett is on the market.
Wow.
Veterans like Shaq Barrett, Zadarius Smith, Daniil Hunter, all on the market. Jadeveon Clowney played, with sort of Denard Wilson in Baltimore last year. So there's a bunch of names there. I don't think they're going to sign a top-level guy, like I said, but what about an AJ Epinesa or a Marcus Golden, another guy from that Carl Lawson free agency class that the Titans missed out on. So anyway, there are guys like that that could be interesting, but I don't know. Defensive end isn't necessarily the biggest position of need for the Titans. All right, that was it. Holy shit, Justin.
That was it.
We just talked for over an hour about free agents. I mean, we do think the Titans are going to be active, very, very active in free agency.
They should be.
That we talked about it. They have a lot of money and they have a bad roster. And I don't know if you saw this tweet on Thursday morning, Chad Forbes spitting out hot fire, coming basically out of nowhere, no source quoted here. No, he just said, Titans will go on a spending spree the way Jags did 2 years ago. Eye-popping contracts. Remember Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Brandon Scherf, and a bunch of other guys, all multi-year deals, then Evan Ingram. That's the aggressiveness you'll see from Titans. And he's just saying that like that's what you'll see. I don't know if he heard this somewhere, if he's just guessing, but I agree. I agree, Chad. I don't know if you're just pulling this out of your ass, but if you are, I think you're right.
Yeah, Chad, I think, has at times thrown stuff at the wall to see what sticks, but he should be right for the same reasons we just said. They've got a bad roster. They've got a lot of money. And you know what? Say what you will about Jacksonville. When they did that, it kind of worked for them, right? They went from basement level team to like AFC South contenders, playoff contenders, won a playoff game, won a division. So they should go out and spend some damn money in free agency, and I hope they do. And I think we just talked about a lot of future Titans, not a future. These guys are going to be Titans in a couple of days, some of them. And you know what's going to happen when that happens? You're going to come back to this episode and pin it. 2 minutes, you're going to cut it up, and we're going to post that social on Twitter because we're going to knock it out of the park. A couple of these guys are going to be Titans.
Absolutely. So that does it for us here. I mean, hopefully we were right, and I can post some clips of us talking about some of these guys next week. We'll see when the deals start. Like I said, Monday at 11 is tampering window, and then free agency officially opens on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. So be ready for that. It's going to be a busy, busy week. We will be back next, probably to recap whatever signings the Titans make in that first wave, remember that first wave's going to last, the first 2 or 3 days from the time the tampering window opens. The biggest names will most likely come off the market. Then there'll be another wave over the next 2 or 3 weeks where, guys in the next 2 tiers get signed, and then free agency will continue, up until June, July. But when July and August come around, there's going to be 1 or 2 veterans on the market that everyone's like, how are they not signed yet? And, sort of like DeAndre Hopkins last year, or maybe there's a late cut like DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe the Titans are the team making the late cut, and it's Andre Dillard post June 1st. We'll see what happens there. Titans will save some money in case something like that comes up again. Rand Carthon mentioned having the flexibility to go get a player who gets cut later in the offseason like DeAndre Hopkins last year. So definitely think the Titans will keep some money for that, but will also be pretty active in the first wave, second wave. I think they're going to be players in every stage of the free agency process here that is about to kick off. So very exciting times in the NFL. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks even more for watching. Check us out on YouTube if you're not, the Music City Audible podcast. And remember, let us know in the comments, who do you want the Titans to sign? List every single player you want the Titans to sign in a comment below. Make them separate comments. 1 comment per player name. Do it for us. We appreciate it. All right, that'll do it. Follow Justin on Twitter at JustinM_NFL. Follow me at Titans Film Room. We'll be back until next time. Y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.